"You don't belong here. Go back to economy where you fit in." Those were the last words Tiffany, a senior flight attendant, thought she'd get away with saying. She looked at two 10-year-old girls, saw their braided hair and hoodies, and decided to block them from the first-class cabin, physically ripping their boarding passes in half. She thought she was protecting the airline's image. She didn't know that the man sitting quietly in 1A watching her every move wasn't just a passenger. He was Julian Thorne, the owner of the entire airline, and those economy kids were his daughters. Watch what happens when arrogance meets the ultimate reality check. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the frenetic energy of holiday travel. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the tarmac was a sprawling gray canvas of jet fuel trucks and baggage carts. But inside the exclusive Aura Atlantic first-class lounge, everything was hushed tones and clinking champagne flutes. Tiffany Blair adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, checking her reflection in the glass partition of the check-in desk. She wasn't just a flight attendant. She was the senior purser for Aura Atlantic's flagship route from New York to London. She took pride in her position, a gatekeeper of luxury. To Tiffany, first class wasn't just a seating assignment. It was a sanctuary that needed to be protected from the riffraff. Flight 882 to Heathrow is now boarding for first class and Diamond Medallion members, the intercom announced softly. Tiffany moved to the boarding door, her posture rigid. She had a smile plastered on her face, but her eyes were scanning the line like a hawk judging every passenger. If your suit wasn't tailored, if your watch didn't glint, Tiffany's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That was when she saw them. Two young girls, no older than 10, were skipping down the jet bridge corridor ahead of the main pack. They were identical twins, black with intricate beaded braids that clicked softly as they moved. They wore oversized, colorful hoodies, one neon pink, the other electric blue, and distressed jeans with sneakers that looked well-worn. They were laughing, holding hands, and dragging small sticker-covered carry-on suitcases behind them. They looked like normal, happy children. But to Tiffany, they looked like errors. She stepped directly into the center of the aisle, effectively blocking the entrance to the aircraft. "Hold it right there," Tiffany said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She didn't use her customer service voice. She used her school principal voice. The twins stopped abruptly, nearly bumping into Tiffany's shins. The girl in the pink hoodie. Sasha looked up with wide, confused eyes. "Hi, we're on this plane." "Not this entrance, you're not," Tiffany said, looking down her nose at them. She pointed a manicured finger back toward the terminal. "Economy boarding is in Group 5. You need to wait until they call your group, and you certainly don't board through the first-class lane. Go back." The second twin, Malia, frowned, tightening her grip on her sister's hand. "But our tickets say 1A and 1B. We're supposed to sit in the big seats." Tiffany let out a short, incredulous laugh. She looked around at the businessmen and wealthy socialites lining up behind the girls. She felt the need to perform to show these high-paying customers that she was maintaining standards. "Sweetheart," Tiffany said, dropping the tone to something condescendingly sweet. "Row 1 is the owner's suite. It costs $20,000 a seat. Now, I don't know whose boarding pass you found or printed off the internet, but playing pretend is over. You are holding up the line. Move." "We didn't find them," Sasha protested, her voice rising. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out 2 crisp, gold-lined boarding passes. "Our dad gave them to us. He's already inside." Tiffany snatched the passes from Sasha's hand. She glanced at them. They indeed said first class, seat 1A and seat 1B. The name on the ticket was blocked by a baggage tag sticker, but the gold foil of the first-class insignia was unmistakable. For a second, Tiffany hesitated. But then she looked at the girls again. The hoodies. The sneakers. The lack of parents hovering over them. Her bias kicked in, overriding her training. Fraud, she thought. This is clearly a system error or a prank. These are invalid, Tiffany declared loudly enough for the passengers behind to hear. I don't know how you got these printed, but Aura Atlantic does not allow unaccompanied minors in the first-class suites, and certainly not with fraudulent tickets. They aren't fake, Malia shouted, tears welling in her eyes. Call our dad. He's inside. His name is... I don't care who your dad is. Tiffany snapped, her patience gone. She ripped the boarding passes right down the middle, the sound echoing in the quiet tunnel. The girls gasped. The line of passengers behind them shifted uncomfortably. You are disrupting a premium boarding process, Tiffany hissed, leaning in close. Step aside, or I will have airport security escort you out of the terminal entirely. You will not step foot on this plane. Inside the aircraft, the atmosphere was serene. The first-class cabin of the Aura Atlantic Boeing 777 was a marvel of modern engineering. There were only 8 suites each with a sliding privacy door, a lie-flat bed, and a personal wardrobe. In seat 2A, a man sat quietly reading a financial report on a tablet. He was dressed in a simple charcoal cashmere sweater and dark jeans. He didn't look like the typical flashy billionaire. He wore no watch, no rings. He looked like a tired father. This was Julian Thorne. What nobody on the flight crew knew, except perhaps the pilot, Captain Miller, was that Julian wasn't just a passenger. He was the majority shareholder and CEO of the Aura Group, which owned the airline. He rarely flew commercial, usually taking his private Gulfstream, but today was special. It was the twins' birthday, and they had begged to fly on Daddy's big plane to London for their vacation. He had boarded early specifically to set up the suites with birthday balloons and gifts before the girls arrived. He had sent them ahead with his personal security detail, instructing the guards to hang back and let the girls board like big girls because they wanted to feel independent. Julian checked his phone. Where are they? He thought. They should have been down the jet bridge 5 minutes ago. He hit the call button. A younger flight attendant, a nervous woman named Jessica, appeared instantly. Yes, sir. Can I get you some champagne before takeoff? No, thank you, Julian said, his voice calm but authoritative. I'm waiting for 2 more passengers. My daughters. They were right behind me. Have you seen them? Jessica frowned. No, sir. The boarding is almost complete. The gate agent mentioned something about a disturbance with some kids trying to sneak in. Julian's blood ran cold. Sneak in. Yes. Jessica continued, oblivious to who she was talking to. Tiffany, our purser, is handling it. Apparently, 2 children tried to use fake tickets to get into the first-class cabin. She's turning them away now. Julian unbuckled his seatbelt. The mechanical click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. Sir, the seatbelt sign is on, Jessica said nervously. Get out of my way, Julian said. He didn't shout, but the intensity in his eyes made Jessica step back instantly. Julian strode down the aisle of the plane, moving toward the boarding door. As he reached the galley, he could hear the commotion from the jet bridge. I told you this is private property. Tiffany's voice was shrill now. Security is on their way. We want our dad. Sasha was crying now, a sound that tore through Julian's heart. Julian stepped out of the aircraft and onto the jet bridge. The scene that met his eyes made his hands curl into fists. His daughters were huddled against the wall of the tunnel, holding each other, tears streaming down their faces. The torn pieces of their golden tickets were scattered on the floor like confetti. Looming over them was Tiffany, her face twisted in a sneer, blocking the path with her arms crossed. Behind her, a line of wealthy passengers looked on, some with pity, others with annoyance at the delay. "What," Julian said, his voice low and dangerous, "is going on here?" Tiffany spun around. She saw the man from seat 2A. She composed herself instantly, putting on her professional mask. "I apologize for the delay, sir," Tiffany said smoothly. "We have a situation with some stowaways. These two girls attempted to board with invalid tickets. I've already called security to remove them so we can depart on time. Please return to your seat. I handled it." "Handled it," Julian repeated. He looked at the torn tickets on the floor. He looked at his terrified daughters. "You ripped their tickets. They were fake, sir," Tiffany insisted, laughing dismissively. "Look at them. Do they look like they can afford a $20,000 suite? We have to maintain the integrity of the cabin for valued customers like yourself." Julian walked past her. He knelt down in front of Sasha and Malia. "Daddy," Malia sobbed, throwing her arms around his neck. "She said we were stealing. She ripped our tickets." The word hung in the air. "Daddy." Tiffany froze. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like she might faint. The passengers in line went dead silent. Julian hugged his daughters tight, whispering in their ears that it was okay. Then he slowly stood up. He turned to face Tiffany. He didn't look like a passenger anymore. He looked like a titan. "You judged my children based on how they look," Julian said, his voice rising, projecting so everyone in the tunnel could hear. "You looked at their skin, their clothes, and you decided they weren't worthy of your integrity." "Sir, I didn't know," Tiffany stammered, taking a step back. Her hands were shaking. "I was just doing my job. They didn't look like..." "Like what?" Julian stepped closer. "Like they belonged. Let me introduce myself properly. My name is Julian Thorne." Tiffany gasped. She knew the name. Every employee at Aura Atlantic knew the name. It was signed on her paychecks. It was on the orientation videos. "Mr. Thorne?" she whispered. Oh my God." "These are not stowaways," Julian said, pointing to the girls. "They are the reason this airline exists. I built this company to connect families, and you just tried to throw my family off the plane." "Please, Mr. Thorne, it was a misunderstanding," Tiffany pleaded, reaching out a hand. "I can fix this. Let me get them some toys, some chocolate. I'll tape the tickets back together." "You ripped more than tickets," Julian said coldly. He pulled out his phone. "Captain Miller, this is Thorne. We aren't taking off yet. I need you to call the airport police and the station manager down to the gate immediately." "Police?" Tiffany squeaked. "Sir, is that necessary? I can just work economy for this flight. Please don't write me up." Julian looked her dead in the eye. "I'm not writing you up, Tiffany. I'm ensuring you never wear an airline uniform again. But before that happens, we are going to make sure everyone here knows exactly who you are." Julian turned to the line of passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. But as the owner of this airline, I cannot allow a bigot to serve you. Drinks are on the house for everyone in the terminal while we resolve this. But this woman is finished." The drama, however, was far from over. Tiffany wasn't the type to go down without a fight. As the reality of losing her high-paying job set in her shock, turned into something uglier, desperation and rage. The silence on the jet bridge was shattered by the sharp click of Tiffany's heels as she took a defensive step back. But instead of crumbling under the weight of Julian Thorne's revelation, something twisted inside her. It was a survival instinct fueled by years of narcissism and the absolute belief that she was untouchable in her domain. She looked at Julian, dressed in casual cashmere, holding the hands of two children in hoodies, and her brain refused to process the truth. The Julian Thorne, the billionaire recluse who owned the conglomerate Numb. It couldn't be. This man was too young, too quiet, too unassuming. He's lying. Tiffany convinced herself. He's a con artist trying to intimidate me, and if I back down now, I look weak. Her eyes narrowed. She saw the passengers behind Julian holding up their smartphones, recording the interaction. She saw an opportunity to flip the script. "You are a liar," Tiffany announced, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. She straightened her spine, smoothing her Aura Atlantic scarf. "I don't know who you think you are impersonating a corporate executive, but that is a federal offense. You are disrupting a federal flight." Julian stared at her, genuinely baffled by her audacity. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Tiffany shouted, playing to the crowd now. She turned to the line of first-class passengers, spreading her hands in a plea for support. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man is aggressive and unstable. He claims to own the airline just to get his stowaway children into first-class seats they didn't pay for. He just threatened my job. I am trying to protect your safety." A murmur went through the crowd. A tall man in a gray suit, clearly impatient, checked his watch. "Look, can we just call the police and get on board? I have a meeting in London." "Exactly," Tiffany cried, feeling emboldened. She turned back to Julian, pointing a shaking finger at his chest. "You need to leave, now, before I press charges for assault." "Assault," Julian repeated calmly, though his jaw was tight. "I haven't touched you, Tiffany. You are verbally assaulting me. You are intimidating a flight crew member." She reached for the wall phone mounted near the aircraft door. "I am calling the captain to have you removed. You and your little brood." Malia squeezed Julian's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "Daddy, is she going to take us to jail?" Julian knelt down again, ignoring Tiffany completely. "No, sweetie. Nobody is going to jail. Except maybe her." He stood up and looked at the crowd, addressing the man in the gray suit directly. "Sir, I apologize for the delay. But if you board this plane with this woman in charge, I cannot guarantee the service standards you paid for. In fact, I'm grounding this crew." "You can't ground the crew," Tiffany screamed, slamming the phone receiver against the wall. "Who do you think you are? I told you who I am," Julian said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. "And since you don't believe me, let's see if you believe your boss." At that moment, the door to the aircraft hissed. The commotion had been loud enough to penetrate the cockpit. Captain Miller, a silver-haired veteran pilot with 4 stripes on his shoulders, stepped onto the jet bridge. He looked annoyed, expecting to deal with a drunk passenger. "What is going on out here?" Miller demanded. "We are 10 minutes past pushback time. Tiffany, why aren't the passengers seated?" Tiffany rushed toward the captain, crocodile tears instantly springing to her eyes. "Captain Miller, thank God, this man," she pointed accusingly at Julian, "is refusing to leave. He brought these 2 children without valid tickets, ripped up the boarding passes I gave him back, and now he's claiming to be the owner of the airline. He's threatening me." Captain Miller's eyes followed Tiffany's finger. He looked at the man standing calmly by the wall. He looked at the 2 terrified girls. The captain's face went pale. He didn't look at Tiffany. He removed his cap and tucked it under his arm, stepping forward with a bowed head. "Mr. Thorne," Captain Miller said, his voice respectful and clear. "I had no idea you were having trouble boarding. My apologies, sir. Welcome aboard." The silence that followed was absolute. Tiffany stopped crying instantly. Her mouth hung open. She looked from the captain to Julian, her brain finally short-circuiting. "Captain," she whispered. You know him, Tiffany." Captain Miller said, his voice stern, lacking any of his usual warmth. "This is Julian Thorne, the chairman of the board, the man who signs our checks." The smartphones in the crowd were all held high now. The passengers were no longer annoyed. They were captivated. They knew they were witnessing a crash and burn of epic proportions. Julian looked at the captain. "Captain Miller, I'm afraid we have a personnel issue. This purser destroyed my daughter's boarding passes, profiled them based on their appearance, and accused me of fraud. She also just accused me of assault in front of witnesses." Captain Miller closed his eyes for a second, a look of deep, pained resignation on his face. He turned to Tiffany. "Did you rip their tickets?" I thought they were fake," Tiffany stammered, backing away until she hit the wall of the jet bridge. "They were wearing hoodies. They didn't look like first class. It's protocol to check for fraud." "Is it protocol to scream at 10-year-olds? Julian asked. "Is it protocol to tell them to go back to economy where they fit in? I heard you, Tiffany. I was right behind the door." "I was protecting the brand," she shrieked, her composure fracturing completely. "I did it for the airline." "You are the liability to the airline," Julian said. "And you're done." But Tiffany wasn't done. The realization that her career was over triggered a fight-or-flight response, and she chose to fight dirty. "You can't fire me," she yelled, her face turning blotchy red. "I have a union, I have rights. You set me up. You dressed them like bums on purpose to trap me. This is entrapment." She lunged toward Sasha, pointing a finger in the child's face. "You planned this, you little brats." Julian moved faster than anyone expected. He stepped between Tiffany and his daughter using his body as a shield. He didn't touch Tiffany, but his presence was a stone wall. "Security!" Captain Miller shouted down the tunnel. Two Port Authority police officers who had been making their way down the bridge after the initial call finally pushed through the crowd of spectators. "What's the problem here?" the lead officer asked, hand resting on his belt. "This woman," Julian said, pointing at Tiffany, "is behaving erratically and has attempted to approach my children aggressively. I want her removed from the terminal." Tiffany gasped. "Officer, he's lying. He's the aggressor. I'm the crew." The officer looked at the captain. "In aviation law, the captain's word is final on the ground." "She's off the flight," Captain Miller said firmly. "Remove her. She is a danger to the passengers." "No, no," Tiffany screamed as the officer reached for her arm. She jerked away. "Do you know who I am? I am the senior purser. You can't touch me." The scene on the jet bridge had transformed from a boarding dispute into a public spectacle. The queue of first-class passengers had parted like the Red Sea to let the Port Authority officers through. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," the officer said, his tone bored but firm. He had dealt with unruly passengers before, but rarely unruly flight attendants. "I am not going anywhere," Tiffany shrieked, clinging to the railing of the jet bridge like a barnacle. "This is my flight. I have seniority." Julian watched her with cold detachment. He turned to the girls. "Sasha, Malia, go with Captain Miller onto the plane. Go find your seats. I'll be there in a minute." "But Daddy," Sasha whimpered. "Go," he said gently. "It's over." Captain Miller ushered the girls into the aircraft, shielding them from the sight of Tiffany being pried off the railing. As the officers finally secured a grip on Tiffany's arms, a man in a sharp navy suit came running down the jet bridge, breathless and sweating. It was Mr. Henderson, the station manager for JFK. He had been alerted by the gate agents that the owner was at the gate, and there was a code red. "Mr. Thorne! Mr. Thorne!" Henderson gasped, skidding to a halt. He looked at the police holding Tiffany, then at the torn tickets on the floor, then at Julian's stony face. "Sir, I am so profusely sorry. I just heard. I came as fast as I could." Julian looked at Henderson. "Henderson, good to see you. We have a problem with your vetting process." Yes, sir. I see that," Henderson stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He turned to Tiffany, his eyes wide with horror. "Tiffany, what on earth have you done? Mr. Henderson!" Tiffany cried, seeing a potential ally. Tell them I'm the best purser you have. This man is ruining me over a misunderstanding." Henderson looked at her like she was radioactive. "Tiffany, shut up. Do you have any idea what you've done? That is Julian Thorne. He owns the planes, the terminal, and the brand you're wearing." "He set me up," Tiffany spat, as the officers began to drag her backward up the tunnel. "He dressed them like garbage to trick me." Julian stepped forward, raising his voice so the entire tunnel could hear him. It wasn't a shout. It was a decree. "I didn't dress them to trick you, Tiffany. I let them dress themselves because they are children on vacation. The fact that you equate hoodies and braided hair with garbage is exactly why you are being removed." He walked closer to her, stopping just out of reach of her flailing legs. "And let's be clear about one thing," Julian continued. "You aren't just losing your job today. I'm placing you on the universal no-fly list for Aura Atlantic and all our partner airlines. You won't just be unable to work in the sky, you won't even be able to be a passenger in it." The color drained from Tiffany's face completely. The no-fly list was a career death sentence. It meant she couldn't even commute for another airline. It was the hard karma beginning to land. "You can't do that," she whispered, her fight suddenly evaporating into sheer terror. "I live in London, my apartment, my life. You should have thought about that before you made 2 little girls cry because you felt powerful," Julian said. "Get her out of here." The officers hauled her away. As she was dragged up the jet bridge, passing the very passengers she had tried to impress, the humiliation was total. The wealthy socialites and businessmen shook their heads. Someone shouted, "Good riddance! Tiffany Blair, the queen of first class, was dragged out past the economy gate like a common criminal, her heels scraping across the linoleum, her immaculate scarf skewed sideways." Julian took a deep breath. He adjusted his sweater. He looked at Henderson, who was trembling. "Get a new crew down here," Julian ordered. "We leave in 20 minutes. And Henderson," "Yes, sir." "Upgrade everyone in Economy Group 1 to business class, and give everyone on this jet bridge a voucher for a free round-trip ticket anywhere we fly. I want to wash the bad taste out of their mouths." "Immediately, sir. Right away." Julian turned and walked onto the plane. The passengers on the jet bridge broke into spontaneous applause. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was different. The remaining flight attendants were huddled in the galley looking terrified. They had heard everything. When Julian walked in, they practically stood at attention. "Relax," Julian said, though his face was still serious. "Just do your jobs with kindness. That's all I ask." He walked to seat 1A. Sasha and Malia were sitting there, holding glasses of orange juice that Captain Miller had personally poured for them. They looked small in the massive leather chairs. "Daddy," Sasha asked. "Is the bad lady gone?" "She's gone," Julian said, kissing her forehead. "She won't bother anyone ever again." He sat down in seat 2A, exhausted. He thought the drama was over. He thought he had cut out the rot. But Julian underestimated Tiffany. As she sat in the holding room of airport security, stripped of her ID badge and awaiting her termination paperwork, Tiffany wasn't reflecting on her mistakes. She wasn't feeling remorse. She was scrolling through her phone, which the officers hadn't confiscated yet. She was looking at the Aura Atlantic internal employee database. She was looking for dirt. "You want to ruin me, Julian Thorne?" she muttered to herself, her eyes manic. "You want to humiliate me in front of the world? Let's see how you like it when the world knows your secrets." When she opened a contact named TMZ Tip Line. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a different battlefield. And Tiffany was about to drop a bomb that would make the incident on the jet bridge look like a minor turbulence. The flight to London had been smooth, the service impeccable. The replacement crew treated the twins like royalty, but Julian Thorne could not relax. He spent the 7-hour journey staring out the window at the Atlantic darkness, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He knew people like Tiffany. He knew that narcissists, when cornered, do not reflect. They attack. He was right. While Julian and his daughters were crossing the ocean, disconnected from the world, Tiffany Blair was in a cheap hotel room near JFK, plotting her resurrection. She had been escorted out of the airport, her badge confiscated, her reputation in tatters. She was stranded in New York, unable to fly standby, forced to pay for a last-minute train ticket or a bus to get anywhere. But she had Wi-Fi, and she had an audience. Tiffany set up her phone on the hotel desk, stacking it against a tissue box. She washed her face to look pale and exhausted. She messed up her hair slightly to appear shaken. She hit record on TikTok. "Hi, everyone," she whispered, her voice cracking theatrically. I don't usually do this, but something happened today that I can't stay silent about." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "I was fired today, after 15 years of loyal service. Why? Because I tried to do my job, because I tried to stop a security breach." She leaned into the camera, her eyes wide and pleading. A man, a billionaire, the owner of the airline, showed up late for a flight. He had 2 children with him who didn't have proper identification and looked suspicious. I followed protocol. I asked for verification. And because he is rich, because he is powerful, he destroyed me. He screamed at me. He humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. He accused me of being a racist just to cover up his own arrogance. And then, he fired me on the spot and banned me from flying home. A tear slipped down her cheek. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I am a single woman stranded in New York with no job and no way home, all because a billionaire didn't want to follow the rules like the rest of us. Please, share this. Don't let him get away with it. Justice. For Tiffany hat boycott Aura, Atlantic, billionaire, bully. She posted the video. By the time Flight 882 touched down at Heathrow, the video had 4 million views. The internet, always hungry for a villain, initially took the bait. Comments poured in. Eat the rich. This poor woman. Aura Atlantic is trash for this. Since when do billionaires get to bypass security sue them, girl? When Julian turned on his phone in the London arrival lounge, his screen was flooded with notifications. His PR chief Marcus was calling. "Julian," Marcus said, his voice tight. "We have a situation. The ex-employee Tiffany Blair. She's gone viral. She's spinning a narrative that you abused your power and that she's a martyr for safety protocols. The stock dipped 2% in pre-market trading. We need to issue a statement." Julian watched the video on his tablet while his daughters played with their luggage nearby. He watched Tiffany cry on screen. He watched the lies spill out of her mouth with such conviction that even he almost believed her. "She says I screamed at her," Julian said calmly. "She says the girls didn't have ID." "The public hates a bully, Julian," Marcus warned. "We should settle, offer her a severance package to sign an NDA, and take the video down. It's the fastest way to kill the story." Julian looked at his daughters. Sasha was wearing her neon pink hoodie. Malia was laughing at a joke. They were the ones who had been screamed at. They were the ones who had been told they didn't belong. "No settlement," Julian said. "Julian, the optics." "I said no." Julian interrupted, his voice like steel. "She wants a war, she can have one. But we aren't fighting with statements. We fight with evidence." "What evidence?" "The airport has cameras, Marcus. The jet bridge has audio recording for liability purposes, and half the passengers were filming. Find the footage, find all of it, and don't just release it to the news. We are going to let her dig her grave a little deeper first." "What do you mean?" "Let her sue," Julian said. "Let her file the lawsuit. Let her go on Good Morning America. let her lie under oath, and then we drop the hammer. 3 weeks later, the media circus was at its peak. Tiffany Blair was enjoying her 15 minutes of fame. She had hired a high-profile attorney, a man named Saul Goodman type, named Richard Vane, who specialized in shaking down corporations. They filed a lawsuit against Aura Atlantic and Julian Thorne personally for wrongful termination defamation of character and emotional distress. Seeking $10 million in damages, Tiffany appeared on morning talk shows wearing a modest pastel suit, looking every bit the grieving professional. "I loved my job," she told a sympathetic host. "I loved my passengers. Mr. Thorne took that away from me because I didn't recognize him. It's a classic case of ego." The public opinion was split, but Tiffany had a strong following of people who saw her as a victim of the elite. The court date for the preliminary hearing arrived. It was held in a federal district court in New York. The courtroom was packed with journalists. Tiffany walked in with her head held high, flanked by Richard Vane. She looked at the defense table. Julian Thorne was there, sitting quietly next to his corporate counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena Rostova. Julian looked calm. Too calm. Richard Vane stood up to give his opening statement. He painted a picture of a tyrannical billionaire crushing a helpless working-class woman. He spoke of protocols and safety and the dignity of labor. "My client," Vane bellowed, "was merely doing the job she was trained to do. She saw 2 individuals who did not fit the profile of the manifest, and she intervened. For this diligence, she was publicly shamed." When it was the defense's turn, Elena Rostova didn't make a speech. She simply stood up. "Your Honor," Elena said, "we dispute the plaintiff's version of events in its entirety. The plaintiff claims she was following protocol. We claim she was exercising racial bias and verbally abusing minors. The plaintiff claims Mr. Thorne was aggressive. We claim he was the only adult in the room acting responsibly." "Objection!" Vane shouted. "That is hearsay. It's his word against hers." "Not quite." Elena said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "We have the receipts. We would like to enter into evidence Defense Exhibit A, the raw security footage from Gate B42, combined with synchronized audio from the jet bridge sensors and supplemental angles from 3 passenger cell phones who voluntarily submitted their evidence to us." Tiffany froze. She hadn't realized there was audio on the jet bridge sensors. "Play the tape," the judge ordered. A large screen in the courtroom flickered to life. The video showed the twins walking happily down the jet bridge. It showed Tiffany stepping out to block them. It showed her face not concerned, but sneering. Then the audio kicked in. It was crystal clear. "You don't belong here. Go back to economy where you fit in." A gasp went through the courtroom. The video continued. It showed Sasha handing over the valid tickets. It showed Tiffany looking at them, then looking at the girls' clothes. "I don't care who your dad is." "Rip." The sound of the tickets tearing was loud in the silent courtroom. Then came Julian. The video showed him walking out. It showed him kneeling to comfort his crying children. It showed him speaking calmly to Tiffany. "You judged my children based on how they look." Then the part that destroyed Tiffany's narrative completely. The video showed Tiffany screaming, lying to the captain, and lunging at the children before the police grabbed her. "You little brats! You planned this!" The screen went black. The courtroom was dead silent. Every journalist was furiously typing. The victim narrative had just been nuked. Elena Rostova turned to Tiffany, who was now trembling in her seat. her pastel suit suddenly looking like a costume. "Ms. Blair," Elena said, "in your affidavit, you stated that the children had no tickets. The video shows them handing you tickets. You stated Mr. Thorne screamed at you. The video shows you screaming at him. You stated you were concerned for safety. The video shows you ripping up valid boarding passes because you didn't like the way 2 black children were dressed." Tiffany stammered. She looked at her lawyer. Richard Vane was packing his briefcase. He knew a losing battle when he saw one. He moved a few inches away from her on the bench. "Your Honor," Julian spoke up for the first time. He stood buttoning his jacket. "This woman dragged my company and my family through the mud to make a quick buck. She tried to monetize her own bigotry." The judge, a stern woman who had little patience for time-wasters, peered over her glasses at Tiffany. "Ms. Blair," the judge said, "it appears you have committed perjury in your affidavit. And Mr. Vane, your case seems to be built entirely on a fabrication." "We move to dismiss, Your Honor," Elena said, "and we are filing a countersuit for defamation brand damage and the costs incurred by the flight delay totaling $400,000. "Dismissed with prejudice," the judge slammed the gavel. "And I will allow the countersuit to proceed." Tiffany slumped in her chair. It wasn't just that she had lost the money. It was that the world now knew the truth. But the hard karma wasn't done yet. Julian Thorne had one more card to play, one that would ensure Tiffany Blair would never be able to hide from her actions again. The sound of the judge's gavel didn't just signal the end of a legal proceeding. It sounded like the shutting of a heavy iron door on Tiffany Blair's life. "Dismissed with prejudice," the judge had said. The words echoed in the high-ceilinged room, bouncing off the mahogany walls that felt like they were closing in on her. Tiffany sat frozen in her chair. The courtroom, previously buzzing with the low hum of journalists and spectators, erupted into a chaotic noise of shuffling papers and snapping laptop lids. She looked to her left, expecting Richard Vane, her shark of a lawyer, to be formulating a plan for an appeal, or at least offering a reassuring platitude. Instead, Vane was already standing, snapping the locks of his briefcase shut with a finality that chilled her. He didn't look at her. He was checking his watch. "Richard," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What do we do now? We can appeal, right? That video, it was taken out of context." Vane stopped. He turned to her, and for the first time the mask of the zealous advocate dropped. In its place was the cold, bored look of a businessman cutting his losses. "There is no we, Tiffany," Vane said, his voice loud enough for the nearby reporters to hear. "I took this case on a contingency basis, assuming you were a victim. You lied to me. You lied to the court. You're radioactive." "But I can't pay the countersuit," she hissed, grabbing his sleeve. $400,000, Richard. I don't have that kind of money. You have to help me." Vane peeled her fingers off his suit jacket, as if they were covered in grease. "Then I suggest you start looking for a very demanding day job. My firm is withdrawing from representing you effective immediately. Good luck, Ms. Blair." He walked away, leaving her alone at the defense table. The walk out of the federal courthouse was a gauntlet of humiliation. Tiffany had expected this moment to be her victory lap, a moment where she would weep gracefully for the cameras and be embraced by the public. She had worn her best pastel suit for exactly that reason. Now, as she pushed through the heavy double doors into the gray New York afternoon, the flashbulbs blinded her, but the questions were like daggers. "Tiffany, is it true you called the twins riffraff? How does it feel to be the face of airline discrimination? Tiffany over here, give us a smile, show us that sneer." She put her head down, clutching her purse to her chest, and ran. She didn't have a town car waiting. She had to fight her way down the subway stairs, the jeers of the paparazzi fading only when the screech of the arriving train drowned them out. Inside the subway car, she saw it. A passenger across from her was scrolling on their phone. On the screen was a meme, a distorted image of Tiffany's face from the security footage with the caption, "Karen Airlines now boarding." She pulled her coat collar up, hiding her face. Tears of rage and shame hot in her eyes. The karma wasn't just hitting, it was hunting her. The financial ruin was the first wave to crash over her. 2 days after the verdict, Tiffany sat in her Manhattan apartment, a place she could barely afford, even with her purser salary staring at a pile of eviction notices. The court had frozen her assets to secure the judgment for Aura Atlantic. Her credit cards were declined. Her bank account was locked. She needed cash and fast. She dragged her Louis Vuitton suitcase from the closet, the same one she used to wheel through terminals like a queen, and began filling it. Not with clothes for a trip, but with her status. The designer handbags, the red-bottom shoes, the silk scarves. She took a cab she couldn't afford to a high-end consignment shop on Madison Avenue, a place where she used to be a customer. The clerk, a young woman with sharp eyeliner, took the items one by one. She inspected a limited edition Chanel bag. "It's barely used," Tiffany said, her voice tight. "I need top dollar for it." The clerk paused. She looked up at Tiffany, then glanced at the iPad on the counter. She tapped the screen a few times, bringing up a news article. She turned the screen around. Disgraced flight attendant ordered to pay $400K. "We can't take these," the clerk said, sliding the bag back across the glass counter. "What? Why?" Tiffany demanded. "It's authentic." "It's not about authenticity," the clerk said coolly. "We curate a lifestyle here. And honestly, nobody wants to buy a bag carried by the woman who made 2 little girls cry. It's bad juju. Please leave." Tiffany stood there, stunned. Her possessions, the very things she thought made her better than the riff-raff, were now worthless because they were attached to her. She left the shop, dragging the heavy suitcase of unsold luxury goods onto the sidewalk. It began to rain. The professional blacklisting was absolute. Tiffany Blair had spent 15 years in aviation. She knew the safety protocols of a Boeing 777 better than she knew her own family. She assumed that once the media storm died down, she could get a job at a smaller airline, maybe a charter company. She was wrong. She applied to Delta United American. Rejection emails came within hours, likely flagged by automated systems. Desperate, she lowered her sights. She applied to a budget regional carrier based in Ohio. She actually got an interview via Zoom. The HR manager, a tired-looking man named Dave, seemed interested in her experience until the very end of the call. "So Tiffany," Dave said, shuffling his papers. "I have to ask. There's a note here in your file from the background check. It says you're on the federal no-fly list for Aura Atlantic." Tiffany's heart stopped. "It was a misunderstanding, Dave. A dispute with management." "A dispute?" Dave typed something into his browser. His face changed instantly. The polite interest vanished, replaced by disgust. "Oh, you're that Tiffany. The viral video one." "That video was edited," she pleaded. "I have 15 years of perfect service. Ms. Blair," Dave said, cutting her off. "In this industry, trust is the currency. You don't have any left. We can't hire you. Honestly, I don't think anyone with wings on their logo will ever hire you. Have a good day." The screen went black. 6 months later. The glamour of the first-class cabin was a distant memory. The scent of expensive perfume and champagne had been replaced by the smell of stale grease and floor cleaner. Tiffany was working the graveyard shift at Big Ed's Diner off the New Jersey Turnpike. It was the only place that didn't run a background check and paid in cash. She wore a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big, stained with coffee and ketchup. Her hair, once immaculately braided and styled, was pulled back in a messy bun under a hairnet. Her feet used to Italian leather ached in cheap, non-slip clogs. It was 3:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. The diner was mostly empty, save for a few truckers and a group of college kids who had just come from a club. "Hey, waitress!" one of the college kids shouted, banging his hand on the table. "We need more fries over here, and get it right this time." Tiffany gritted her teeth. She grabbed the coffee pot and walked over. "Coming," she muttered. As she refilled their mugs, she kept her head down. She had learned that eye contact was dangerous. "Whoa," one of the girls in the booth said. She was scrolling through her phone, then looked up at Tiffany. She nudged her boyfriend. "Babe? Look at her." "What?" the boyfriend asked, chewing a burger with his mouth open. "The waitress," the girl whispered, loud enough for Tiffany to hear. "It's the Aura Atlantic lady, the one who got owned by the billionaire." Tiffany froze. She felt the blood drain from her face. "Not here," she prayed. "Please, not here." "No way," the boyfriend laughed. He squinted at Tiffany. "Hey, excuse me, are you Tiffany Blair?" Tiffany gripped the coffee pot so hard her knuckles turned white. "I'm just trying to do my job, sir." "It is her!" the boy shouted, pulling out his phone and aiming the camera at her. "Yo, TikTok, guess who's serving me burgers? It's the first-class queen herself. How's the view from down there, Tiffany?" "Please stop," Tiffany whispered, tears threatening to spill. "Please just let me work." "Say the line," the girl taunted. "Tell us we don't belong here. Tell us to go back to economy." The whole table erupted in laughter. Tiffany turned and walked back to the kitchen, the laughter following her like a physical blow. She pushed through the swinging doors and collapsed against the stainless steel counter, sobbing into her apron. She had spent her life judging people based on their service jobs, their clothes, their status. Now she was on the other side of the counter, trapped in the very hell she used to inflict on others. She was serving the public, and the public was serving her karma plate by plate, every single night. Meanwhile, miles above her, the world she had left behind was healing. Julian Thorne had kept his promise. The incident at JFK hadn't just removed a bad apple. It had fertilized the soil for something better. Inside the Aura Atlantic headquarters, the atmosphere had shifted. The elitism that Tiffany had embodied was gone. Julian had personally overseen the implementation of the Open Sky initiative. It was a mandatory training program, but it wasn't boring corporate videos. It involved flight crews volunteering in the communities they served, reminding them that every passenger has a story. But the true resolution lay with the family. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in London. Julian Thorne sat in the garden of his estate, watching Sasha and Malia run through the falling leaves with their new puppy. They were 11 now. They had grown taller, their braids longer. They wore whatever they wanted today. It was superhero t-shirts and muddy jeans, and they moved with a lightness that told Julian the trauma of that day had faded. "Daddy," Julian looked up from his book. Sasha was standing there, holding a bright red maple leaf. "For you," she said, handing it to him. "Thank you, sweetheart," Julian said, tucking it into his pocket. "Are you excited for the trip back to New York tomorrow?" Sasha hesitated. She looked at her sister, then back at her dad. "Are we taking the big plane again?" "Yes," Julian said gently. "Flight 882. Is everyone going to be nice?" she asked, her voice small. Julian set his book down. He motioned for both girls to come sit on the bench beside him. He wrapped his arms around them, pulling them close. "Sasha, Malia," he began, his voice steady and low. Do you know why that woman Tiffany was so mean to you? Because we didn't look rich, Malia asked. Because she was empty, Julian corrected. She thought that making you feel small would make her feel big. But look at where she is now, and look at where you are. He pointed to the sky where a silver jet was leaving a contrail high above the clouds. You have a power that she never had, Julian told them. You have the power to decide how you treat people. Tomorrow when we get on that plane, I want you to say hello to the flight attendants. I want you to say thank you when they bring you a drink. I want you to be the kind of passengers that make their day better. Can you do that? Yes, Daddy, they said in unison. That is how we win, Julian whispered, kissing the tops of their heads. We don't win by being richer. We win by being kinder. The next day, Flight 882 boarded at Heathrow. Julian walked down the jet bridge, holding his daughter's hands. As they reached the aircraft door, the new senior purser, a warm woman named Elena, with a genuine smile, greeted them. Welcome aboard, Mr. Thorne. Welcome, girls. Sasha looked at Elena. She didn't hide behind her dad. She stepped forward. Hi, Sasha said, smiling brightly. I love your scarf. It's really pretty. Elena looked surprised, then beamed. Why, thank you, sweetie. That is so nice of you to say. We're in seat 1A and 1B, Malia added proudly. But we promise not to be messy. Elena laughed, a rich, happy sound. You can be as messy as you want. We are just happy to have you here. Julian watched the exchange, a lump in his throat. He saw the kindness flowing both ways. He saw the cycle of toxicity broken. He walked into the cabin, took his seat in 2A, and watched his daughters settle into their suites. They were laughing, adjusting their screens completely at ease. Julian closed his eyes as the plane began to taxi. He thought of Tiffany likely starting her shift at the diner, right about now, wiping down tables. He didn't feel anger anymore. He just felt a profound sense of balance. The universe had corrected itself. The gatekeepers were gone, and the sky finally belonged to everyone. And that, my friends, is the story of how one woman's arrogance became her ultimate downfall. Tiffany Blair thought her position gave her the right to judge the world, but she forgot that the world has a funny way of judging back. She judged a book by its cover, failing to realize that the tattered cover belonged to the owner of the library. In her quest to protect the image of first class, she lost her place in it forever. She traded a career in the clouds for a life of regret, learning the hard way that true class isn't about the ticket you hold, but the respect you show to others. Julian Thorne didn't just defend his daughters, he defended the dignity of every person who has ever been judged by their appearance. If this story of massive karma and justice served gave you chills, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells YouTube you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new drama. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that being kind costs nothing but being mean can cost you everything. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.